In this video, we're going to look at the top 5 most common telephone interview questions, and I'm going to help you plan fantastic answers to these that are going to get you through the face-to-face interviews. So let's start with a really common interview question that people often do very badly on, which is, what are your key strengths and weaknesses? And there is a simple formula for answering this question that is actually really effective. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to look at the job description and pick out a skill that you have that is highly relevant to that job description. So that's how you're going to identify your strength. Once you've identified it, you need to prepare some evidence. You have to convince the person that not only you think this is a strength, but you can actually back it up with the opinions of other people or some really good evidence. And most importantly, you have to pick a strength that is totally essential for the job, because you're selling yourself in this interview. So if you're saying, I have this strength should be super relevant, and you're going to sell yourself on that basis. And when you're actually going to answer the question, there is a structure that is really helpful to plan out your answer. So you start with a point, so that's your strength. Then you provide some evidence to back it up, and then you explain to them how your strength is actually relevant. You have to do the work for them. You have to do that explanation and linking. And if you do that well, it really does sell yourself effectively. So you start with the point. For example, you could say, I have an outstanding record in customer service. You're going to back that up with some evidence. For example, you've been Employee of the Month at your previous role. You've got a glowing reference. If you were saying something about having good programming skills, you might want to bring along some evidence of grades and have that in front of you, so you can say, in this course, I got these grades. And if you'd like, a copy of that, I'm happy to provide that. And the last step is the one that's often overlooked, is people tend to just say their strength and then talk a little bit about it, but they don't explain exactly how their strength is relevant to the role. So they're missing the opportunity to really sell themselves. So make the link between your skill and the job. Say, because I'm really good at this, this is how I can help your company. And if you do that, you're going to score much higher on this question. And so let's look now at weaknesses. And this is a question that you can lose the entire interview over if you answer badly, because you can reveal certain things that you shouldn't be. So you're going to really carefully plan this one. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to make sure you're not picking like something that is a fake weakness. For example, saying, I am a perfectionist and it really holds me back because I have to have everything absolutely perfect, which is sort of a weakness and sort of bragging. And it shows that you've got an inability to really recognize any areas for development, and that will count against you. You're going to also make sure that you talk about the fact that you're actually doing something about it. So you've got this weakness, and here's what you need to do and are doing to overcome it. But the number one most important thing to avoid doing badly on this question is to make sure that your weakness really isn't all that relevant to the job. So if you're applying for a customer service role, don't say that you often come across rude, because that's going to lose you the whole job. So the structure for answering the weakness question is to start by saying, one of the weaknesses I'm very much aware of is, you're showing that awareness, and then you're giving your weakness. I'm working to overcome this by. So say exactly what you're doing to overcome the weakness. And then lastly, say, I'm looking to take advantage of, and then start detailing the training, the mentoring, or any sort of support that the company offers. If you're looking to improve your communication skills or your written skills, is there any training courses? Is there any, learning programs that the company offers? Research those. And if you can link your weakness to something the company offers, that's a really great way to answer this question, because it's also answering part of your motivation. Let's look at question 2. What relevant work experience do you have? And so the 3 elements of a good answer is that it's highly relevant. So you've got work experience that is relevant. If you've got any work experience, if you do the work, you can make it relevant. You can explain what you learned in your last job and how it matches up. Second thing is, you want it to be evident. So if you're saying, I learned this, or I completed this training course, you want to actually convince them that you really did. And you also want to be credible. So you don't want to make ridiculous claims about what you got out of your previous work experience, because that sets you up as someone that can't be trusted. So the things that they like to hear is, they like to hear about all the training and learning that you accomplished. And if you've got certificates, of course, it's a telephone interview, so you can't show them, but you can say, I have a certificate in this, and I'm happy to provide anything that you would like me to. You need to say exactly how it's relevant. You don't want the person to hear your work experience and go, that's not relevant. You want to say, here's my work experience and I learned this. This is how it matches up. In my last role, I spent a lot of time working with customers, and this is what I'm doing in this role. In my last role, I did lots of Java programming, and I see you've got lots of big contracts around Java. So you're making that link for them. You're going to talk about how you're going to bring your experience from your previous role to the current role. If you've got good references, and if you left on good terms, they are also really great evidence to bring into this question. And so if you mention as many of these as you can and hit those three elements of a good answer, you'll do quite well on this question. So question 3, tell me about yourself. This is a really easy question, people think, but it's often answered very poorly. So the 4 pillars of a good answer to the tell me about yourself question are to talk about your experience, then your accomplishments, your interests, and then your motivations. So with the experience, immediately go to your last job unless there's some issue around that. Then talk about all relevant work that you've completed, and how that is relevant. And if you've delivered any major projects or been a part of something that was really successful, this is the opportunity to highlight that, because the interview is probably not going to go on for that long. So you need to get across all your great experiences. You're then going to talk about your accomplishments. So if you're applying for a graduate position, you're going to talk about your academic achievements, talk about what you did extracurricular, very briefly just mentioning it, and any professional development that you've done and professional accomplishments that you've got to your name are really great. Your interests are well worth mentioning. It shows that you're a well-rounded individual. Try and make them relevant to the job. If you've got anything that's impressive, if you're an accomplished portrait artist, for example, anything that makes you stand out, this is your opportunity to sell yourself on that. And then also look at your interests and hobbies, and don't just mention them, talk about the skills that you've done. Say, for example, you were involved in archery. Well, you're probably going to be teaching people skills, you're going to be working with other people, you're going to be socializing. All of these things are skills that you're developing in your personal time, and you can really sell yourself on that. And lastly, this is your opportunity to control the narrative around your motivation. So rather than being questioned or why are you applying for this job, this is your opportunity to preempt that and start that conversation. So you're going to link your personal interests to the job, show off all the research you've done on the company in a very brief sense. Say, I know this about the company and this really appeals to me because. And if this is your kind of next step in the career, you can talk about, why you're looking for a step up and how you've developed up to this point that makes you feel that you're ready for this next step. And if you get these 4 pillars in, and you have to be quite quick and quite succinct to get it all in, you should do quite well. It's a good structure to follow. Let's look at question 4. Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? And this follows on quite nicely from the previous one. You should have set this up quite well. So a great phrase that employers like to hear is that you're going to move with the business. So you're going to be aware of where the business is going and what opportunities that's likely to present. You can also talk about what the company can offer. So what training and development does the company provide, and how does that help you in your 5-year journey? And a good thing to often talk about is moving up one level, because one level in 5 years is reasonable, but you have to be careful. You're talking about how you're going to earn your way to that position. You're not going to assume that you're going to just jump straight to that, because a bad answer has these elements. So the promotion is assumed automatically. So you're not going to be earning and developing it, and you're not going to be, being outstanding in your role before you move up. You're just going to say, in 5 years' time, I'm going to be the level above. Answers can come across as arrogant or unrealistic. So again, if you're assuming a promotion or you're assuming 2 levels or ridiculous career progression, that's going to count against you. And the absolute worst thing to say, and if you say this, you're probably not going to get the job, is if you talk about leaving the company at any point, or you're not sure in 5 years' time what you're going to be doing. That also sounds a bit like probably not working here. So anything that alludes to leaving the company is an absolute no-no, and it's going to lose you the interview. So let's look at the final question, the problematic team question. So this is the case where you've worked in a team and something's went wrong. So the question might be, describe a time that you worked in a team that there was conflict, or you experienced conflict in a team working situation, or someone wasn't working very well in a team. That's a classic interview question. And there's a good and a bad way to answer it. So a good way starts with an actual conflict. So if you say, "Oh, I've never experienced conflict in a team," or you talk about something that is so ridiculously minor, it's saying you lack experience. So if you don't have an example of a conflict in a team, that's evidence you've not got very much experience. So once you've got your example, you're going to talk about how it was managed very well and professionally. And the most important thing is always pick an example that led to a positive outcome. So if you're working in a university project, you ought to pick the one that got an A and then talk about the conflict, but you got an A anyway. So it's got to have a positive outcome, because they don't want people that can't manage teamwork and can't deliver good outcomes. The bad answers have a major conflict. So something that was totally disastrous, you want to absolutely avoid it. You want to talk about that, that didn't even happen. Just don't mention it. If you attack or criticize any team member, so you say the project wasn't successful because Bob didn't do anything and was totally useless, well, that's an inability to take responsibility, because you're a member of the team and you're jointly accountable for it. And also, it's going to suggest that if you're working at this company, you're going to nitpick and attack other team members and blame things on other people. So when the project's a failure, you're going to go to blaming, and you're not going to have good relationships with your team. So never say anything negative about anyone in your team ever. It's a top tip for this question. Never say anything negative about anyone at any point, because it's only going to count against you. And if you pick a project with an overall negative outcome, you've just set yourself up to fail. So, top tip is to prepare 2 good examples where there was actual conflict, but where you figured it out, you put in support, you worked well with your team members, and the problem was solved, and a positive outcome happened in the end. So hopefully this video was really helpful to you. Best of luck in your telephone interview, and I hope you get through to the face-to-face interviews. And finally, thank you very much for watching.